So how do I find a good recruiter, man? Because I feel like I personally get a bunch of inbox emails and stuff like that on
Yeah.
LinkedIn, and I'm like, what are sort of those things, those red flags I should watch out for?
Sure, good question. One, I would just say time in the industry, and maybe it's not fair to everybody who's just starting out and trying to make their bones for the first time, but it's
Right.
just like it's no cost to you. It doesn't cost you anything. If you're going to go buy a house and you hire a realtor, why would you hire Aunt Jenny who sells two houses a year or who helps people buy two houses a year for the last 3 years instead of Gabrielle who sells or who helps people buy 35 houses a year and is really very good and very connected? Like, it doesn't cost you any more money to work with a successful recruiter.
Mm-hmm.
Zero. So the first thing I'd be looking for are, number one, just depth of experience, how many years in the industry. It's a high
Right.
turnover industry, particularly in that first 1 to 2 years. A lot of people do it. Almost nobody survives it. It's just how it goes. And the next thing I'd be looking for is a niche recruiter. So someone who specializes. And the way to narrow it down is a generalist can come in a lot of different ways. Some generalists, they do tech and they do finance, they do admin, they do hard hat, contract labor and construction workers. And I would probably avoid that if you're in the Salesforce ecosystem. I would be looking for someone who specializes in Salesforce. Of course, I'm going to say that anyway, but I can tell you the thing
Yeah, it
is a
makes sense.
beast. Like, it's a beast, like it's
Yeah.
complex. And
Mm-hmm.
just because you software development lifecycle and what DevOps means and all of the other sort of ancillary tech speak that goes with software development or software and systems administration in general doesn't mean that language is necessarily going to translate to connections with the right kinds of companies that you want to be connected to if the person's not niche. And I'm not the only niche Salesforce recruiter out there. There
Sure.
are others. There's a very big one that everybody knows about. There's some smaller individuals like Chris Hopper, who's a great guy. And there are some other individuals that were just smaller firms or little branches of big firms that specialize in it. Any of those are viable options. A
Okay.
company like mine, where we have this many clients that we serve, we're not going to have all whatever 6,000 openings in the country at any
Yeah.
given time. We just aren't. So I would focus for experience and niche and start there.
Mm.
And then see if you can trust this person. Do they show up when they say they're going to show up? Do they ask you good
Yeah.
questions? Do they sound like the kind of person that a client is going to believe or listen to? And you can
Yeah.
also ask them, what's your submittal to interview ratio? So if, let's say you're my
Okay.
candidate and I submit you to a client, I have somewhere around a 90% interview ratio. That means if I submit you, and I'm very particular, so I'm careful
Sure.
about who I submit,
Yeah.
but if I submit you, there's a 90% chance you're going to get an interview with my client. That's very different than they're submitting you in 30 different jobs and you get no interviews because they don't have a relationship with the hiring manager, like some others, like me, or like some other folks who do what
Yeah.
I do
That's a
also.
great point.
Yeah,
I didn't know that was
so good
even
question.
that people track that. So that's a great question. What do you think about like people from out of country? So I've been getting a lot of recruiters from Asia, like that are just like
Yep.
trying to, place me, and I'm like that feels weird. Like, how are you gonna
Yeah.
find me a job? Like when I don't know how. What should we be wary of that, or what does that look like to you?
Yeah. I'd be wary of it. I'd be wary of it. I wouldn't work with them.
Okay, well that's
I wouldn't
easy.
work. I like, I just, yeah. And look, there are different reasons why. Now, some, they might, here's been my experience. It's been actually, because I've worked with some of them in the past. Maybe they've come to me because they need people. And we've looked at almost white labeling some of my
I
candidates
see.
through them for contracts. But the reality is, more times than not, they don't even have the job locked down. Like, they don't even
Mm,
have it. So they're telling you about a job. They saw that job on an ad. They don't have a contract with a hiring manager or with that firm. They're working for $4 or $5 an hour over there. Like, they don't care. They're going to get paid no matter what. And I don't want to speak ill of, there's some really great recruiters that are overseas.
sure.
There's nothing wrong with it. But you just have to really understand, do you have a direct relationship with the hiring manager? Why did the firm choose your company to represent you? How many other staffing firms are working with this specific client that you're competing against? So all of mine are exclusive. I think I have one client that's not exclusive. So if I get a job order, that job order is through me. That's it. Like, it's not going to
Hmm.
be at Mason Frank. It's not going to be at Robert Half. It's not going to be at Tech Systems. But typically with the overseas recruiters, they might have 15 other companies that are all trying to place someone on. So it's way more competition. Hence, the submittal to interview ratio is about that big, and it's just not worth your time.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. So I guess some good advice would just be like, hey, you can enter into those relationships if you want, but be 10x more cautious and ask 10x more questions than not. Okay,
Yeah.
that's good,
Look, I'm a
man.
big fan of efficiency. I don't think it's an efficient way to market yourself through overseas agencies.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So as a recruiter, like as a developer, like a recruiter would, for me, it helps me by giving me access into companies and pretty much direct access to hiring managers, no ATS systems, things like that. I guess I
Hopefully,
should, hopefully, yeah. What I'm trying
hopefully
to say
they
is, I
might just be
guess,
you in. Yeah.
okay, yeah.